The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Sarah Martinez pressed her forehead against the cold window of the small cafe where she worked, watching the gray water pool in the cracked pavement outside. Her reflection stared back at her, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun, the green apron with coffee stains she could never quite wash out. "Table 6 needs their check," Maria called from behind the counter. Sarah nodded, grabbing the receipt pad. 6 months ago, she would have laughed if someone told her this would be her life. 6 months ago, she'd been married, living in a modest but comfortable home in the suburbs, planning a future. Then David left, no warning, no explanation that made sense. Just a note on the kitchen counter, "I can't do this anymore, I'm sorry." She'd found out later there was someone else. Younger, he'd said, when she finally got him on the phone. Someone who understood him better. The divorce papers came by courier 2 weeks later. He'd been thorough, the house was in his name, the car too. She got to keep her grandmother's wedding ring and whatever she could pack in 3 suitcases. "Ma'am?" The elderly woman at table 6 smiled kindly. "Just the check, dear." Sarah handed it over, forcing a smile. The woman left a $5 tip on a $12 breakfast, and Sarah's throat tightened. She'd become the kind of person people pitied. The bell above the door chimed. Sarah glanced up out of habit, then froze. The man who entered didn't belong in a place like Morrison Street Cafe. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Sarah made in 3 months. Rain dotted his shoulders, and he brushed it off absently, looking around with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was handsome in that carved, deliberate way. Sharp jawline, silver threading through dark hair at his temples, eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. He chose a booth by the window. Sarah's booth. She grabbed a menu and a pot of coffee, trying to ignore the way her pulse had kicked up. Rich people made her nervous now. They reminded her of everything she'd lost, everything she'd never really had. "Good morning," she said, setting down the menu. "Coffee, please." His voice was deep, textured. When he looked up at her, something flickered in his expression. "Sarah?" She nearly dropped the coffee pot. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He studied her face for a long moment. No, you wouldn't remember me, but I remember you." He paused. "St. Mary's Hospital, about 15 years ago. You were a volunteer in the pediatric ward." The memory surfaced slowly. She'd volunteered there during college, reading to sick children, playing games with them. It felt like another lifetime. Yes, I did. I'm sorry, I don't... My daughter was there." His jaw tightened. "Leukemia. Emma." She was 7. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. She did remember. A little girl with a pink headscarf, huge brown eyes, a laugh that seemed impossible given her circumstances. Sarah had read Herschel's Web 3 times. "Emma," she whispered. "How is she? She's 22 now, finishing her master's degree in biology." His smile transformed his face. "She made it. And she's never forgotten, the volunteer who made those months bearable. I'm so glad." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "That's wonderful. My name is James Richardson." He extended his hand. She shook it, confused by the formality. "Sarah Martinez, I know this might seem strange, but would you sit down for a moment?" Sarah glanced back at Maria, who shooed her away with a dish towel. The cafe was nearly empty anyway. She slid into the booth across from him, heart hammering. James Richardson folded his hands on the table. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. Can you do that?" She nodded, bewildered. 15 years ago, when Emma was sick, I was desperate. My wife had died 2 years before in a car accident, and Emma was all I had left. I was building my first company, tech software, and I was failing. The medical bills were crushing me. I was about to lose everything. He paused, looking out at the rain. "One day I was sitting in that hospital room, and you came in. You sat with Emma for 3 hours. You made her laugh. You made her forget she was sick. And when you left, she looked at me and said, 'Daddy, I'm going to get better. I want to be like Sarah. I want to help people.'" Sarah's vision blurred. She remembered that day. She'd been going through her own struggles. Her father had just lost his job. Her mother was ill. But Emma's smile had somehow made it all feel manageable. That night, James continued, something changed for me. I stopped focusing on what I was losing and started focusing on what I could build. For Emma, for her future. I worked differently, thought differently. He met her eyes. My company is now worth $2 billion. Sarah blinked. That's incredible. Congratulations. I've been looking for you for 5 years, he said quietly. Ever since Emma graduated high school and told me she wanted to find the volunteer who'd meant so much to her. It took time. You'd moved, changed your name when you got married. But I found you. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because I want to say thank you. Because Emma wants to say thank you. And because he pulled an envelope from his jacket. Because I believe in paying debts. He slid the envelope across the table. Sarah stared at it. Open it. With shaking hands she did. Inside was a check. She looked at the number, then looked again. Then looked a third time because it couldn't possibly be real. $2 million. This is a joke. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. It's not. I can't accept this. I was a volunteer. I was doing what anyone would do. But you did it, James said firmly. You showed up. You cared. You gave Emma hope when I had none to give her. Do you know what that's worth? Not $2 million. To me it is. He leaned forward. Sarah, I know a little about your situation. Not everything. I'm not a stalker. But I know about your divorce. I know you're working 3 jobs to afford a studio apartment in a neighborhood where you shouldn't walk alone at night. I know you're drowning. Shame flooded her. How? Public records, mostly. And I asked around. He raised a hand before she could protest. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to help you. The way you helped Emma. The way you helped me, even though you didn't know it. Sarah looked down at the check. $2 million. She could pay off her debts, get a real apartment, go back to school like she'd always wanted, maybe even start the nonprofit she'd dreamed about as a naive 22-year-old. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll take it. Say you'll let someone help you for once. She thought about David, about how he'd made her feel small and incapable, about the lawyer who'd barely fought for her because she couldn't afford a retainer, about Maria, who paid her under the table because Sarah's credit was too destroyed to open a bank account for direct deposit. There's a condition, James said. Her stomach sank. Of course there was. Emma wants to meet you. She's in town next week for a conference. Would you have dinner with us? Sarah started laughing. She couldn't help it. She laughed until tears ran down her face, until James looked concerned, until Maria came over asking if everything was okay. I'm sorry, Sarah gasped. I thought you were going to ask for something terrible. Would dinner be terrible? No, dinner would be perfect. She looked at the check again. The number hadn't changed. This was real. This was happening. I need you to understand something, she said, meeting his eyes. What I did for Emma, I did because she deserved kindness. Every child does. I didn't do it for this. I know, James said softly. That's exactly why you deserve it. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of a mirror in a hotel bathroom, barely recognizing herself. The dress was simple but elegant. Emma had helped her pick it out during one of their now regular coffee dates. The young woman was everything Sarah had hoped she'd become. Brilliant, kind, passionate about medical research. Tonight was the charity gala. James's company was donating $5 million to childhood cancer research, and he'd asked Sarah to make a short speech. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. Heard you came into some money. We should talk. She deleted it without responding. Another text, this one from James. Emma's saving you a seat. No pressure, but you're going to be amazing. Sarah smiled. She'd used part of the money to hire a lawyer, a real one this time, who discovered David had hidden assets during the divorce. The rest she'd put toward the foundation she was starting, a volunteer program matching at-risk youth with mentors. Emma had signed on as a board member. Her hands shook slightly as she walked toward the ballroom, not from fear, but from the weight of possibility. 6 months ago, she'd been abandoned, broken, invisible. Now she was here. The doors opened. James and Emma stood together, waving her over. The room was full of people in expensive clothes. But Sarah didn't feel small anymore. She'd learned something in these past weeks. Value wasn't about what you had or who stayed or how much money sat in your account. It was about who you were when no one was watching. about the kindness you gave when you had nothing to gain, about showing up, even when, especially when, it was hard. She'd been that person in a hospital room 15 years ago. She was still that person now, just with better shoes. As she crossed the room toward her friend and her friend's father, Sarah thought about all the people who'd counted her out, who'd pitied her, who'd thought she'd never recover from David's betrayal. What James had done wasn't just give her money, he'd reminded her of who she'd always been, underneath the pain and shame, someone who mattered, someone whose smallest actions could ripple out in ways she'd never imagine, someone worthy of kindness in return. The applause started before she even reached the podium. Emma hugged her tight, whispering, "You saved my life, now let me help you live yours." And Sarah, who hadn't cried in months, finally let herself weep. Not from sadness, but from the stunning realization that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe paid attention. Sometimes love did win. Sometimes kindness returned. Sometimes the story didn't end with abandonment and loss. Sometimes it was just beginning.